The sound of champagne glasses clinking died instantly. All you could hear was a slow, drip, drip, drip. A drop of red wine, from a bottle that cost more than my first car, fell from my ruined silk blouse onto the marble floor. The room, full of so-called titans of industry, exploded with laughter. Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Vance Innovations, held the empty glass with a smug grin. To him, and everyone else celebrating the massive $800 million Aerodyne deal, I was a nobody. Just some girl who'd wandered into their party. What they didn't know is that with that one arrogant move, they weren't just staining my shirt, they were personally torching their own careers and canceling that $800 million deal. Their laughter would die. And I'd be the only one left smiling. Section 1, The Ghost in the Machine. My story didn't start in that ridiculous ballroom. It began in a dusty office that smelled of old books and soldering irons. That was my father's world. He was Alistair Vance, the quiet founder of Vance Innovations. He was a genius who built a tech empire from his garage, but he was also a man who trusted circuit boards more than people. He thought ambition was a disease, so he raised me far away from all the corporate backstabbing. While other kids were going to parties, I was learning to code, reading financial statements, and understanding how to build a company from the ground up. That he taught me that real power isn't loud, it's invisible. It's the silent ownership, the quiet control. When he died, he didn't leave me a fancy title or a corner office. He left me something way more powerful, 51% of Vance Innovations. It was all tucked away in a complex trust that made my identity a ghost in the company's own system. There was just one condition: I had to stay anonymous for 5 years, watching the company from the shadows, learning its secrets before I took my place. Those 5 years were up next week. The current CEO, Marcus Sterling, was my father's biggest mistake. Dad hired him to be the charming face of the company, the guy who could dazzle investors. But in private, my father called him the hollow man. All style, no substance, driven by nothing but greed. For 5 years, I watched Marcus. I sat in on earnings calls as an unknown investor. I read every memo. I saw the rot setting in. He was running the company into the ground with risky deals that just made him look good. The Aerodyne deal was his masterpiece. An $800 million acquisition that looked great on paper. But I knew the truth. I saw the real numbers his accountants tried to bury. The deal was a house of cards, designed to pump up the company's value just long enough for Marcus and his friends to cash out their stock options and leave the business to die. This gala wasn't a celebration. It was a heist. So I decided to go. Not as a ghost on a conference call, but as a person. I wanted to look them in the eye, just once, before I tore down everything they'd built on my father's legacy. I picked out a simple blouse and skirt. No fancy jewelry. I wanted to be overlooked. I just had no idea how right I'd be. Section 2, The Celebration and the Humiliation. The party was as gross as I'd imagined. It was in the grand ballroom of a hotel so dripping with gold and crystal it felt like being inside a pirate's treasure chest. The air was thick with perfume, power, and the sound of people congratulating themselves. That I spotted Marcus holding court, flanked by his 2 favorite yes-men, Julian Thorne, the CFO, and Bryce Calloway, the head of marketing. Julian was a twitchy guy who looked like he was constantly calculating the price of everything in the room. Bryce was a handsome airhead whose only real skill was agreeing with Marcus. I hung back, nursing a glass of water, just watching. After a bunch of boring speeches, Marcus took the stage to thunderous applause. He threw around empty buzzwords like synergy and disruption, and the crowd ate it up. He thanked his visionary team, and they soaked it in. He called the $800 million deal a legacy for the ages. My stomach turned. It was a legacy of fraud. Later, as people were networking, I found myself standing near a display of the Aerodyne tech. I was lost in thought when I heard them. Marcus, Julian, and Bryce were heading to the bar, and I was in their way. Well, look what we have here, Marcus said, his voice dripping with condescension. Are you lost, little one? I just turned to face him. My invitation was basically a ghost ticket. They had no idea who I was. They saw my simple clothes and my unimpressed face, and their inner bullies came out to play. I was just admiring the design, I said calmly. Bryce snorted. I'm sure. Probably a little over your head, though. This is the big leagues, sweetheart. The catering entrance is that way. The insult was so childish I almost laughed. This is who they were. Bullies in $1,000 suits. I think I'm exactly where I need to be, I replied, my voice steadied. My refusal to back down must have triggered him. His smile tightened. He looked at the glass of red wine in his hand, then at my cream-colored blouse. And then I saw the ugly idea dawn on his face. You know, the first lesson in the big leagues, he said, stepping right up to me, is knowing your place. He tilted his hand. The wine hit my chest, a shocking splash of cold liquid soaking through the silk. And your place, he said, emptying the rest of the glass on me for good measure, is not here. A few people gasped, but the sound was drowned out by laughter. Julian and Bryce howled. Their whole circle joined in. They saw a powerful man putting some nobody in her place. They saw a joke. They didn't see the last nail being hammered into their own coffin. The laughter echoed around me, but all I felt was a cold, clarifying calm. The time for watching was over. Section 3, the calm before the storm. The laughter was deafening, but my head was completely silent. I could feel everyone staring, some with pity, most with amusement. I looked down at the dark red stain spreading across my blouse. Marcus was still grinning, soaking up the approval from his buddies. He expected me to cry or run away humiliated. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Slowly, I lifted my eyes and met his. I held his gaze, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of confusion behind his smugness. My reaction wasn't in his playbook. A quiet girl in a stained shirt shouldn't be looking at him like he was an insect under a microscope. You will regret that, I said. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. My voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the noise between us. Bryce chuckled nervously. Ooh, a threat. What are you gonna do, call your manager? I gave them a small, cold smile. Something like that. Without another word, I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I walked with my head held high, the cold, wet fabric clinging to my skin. I could feel their eyes on my back, their laughter sounding a little less confident now. I found a quiet alcove near the restrooms and pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. I had one number on speed dial, saved for this exact moment. He answered on the first ring. Arthur, I said. It's time. There was a short pause. Arthur Covington was the chairman of the board. He was a dear friend of my father's and the only person who knew my secret. Ilara? What happened? Are you okay? He asked, his voice full of concern. Everything is going exactly as planned, I said, my tone like ice. I'm at the gala. Marcus just showed his true colors in front of everyone. I need you on stage in exactly 10 minutes. Cut the music. You're going to introduce me. And get our legal team on the line. The Aerodyne deal is dead. Another pause. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. He knew my father's will, and he knew I inherited it. 10 minutes, he finally said, his voice now firm. Security is standing by. I hung up. I caught my reflection in a darkened window. The woman staring back wasn't a victim. That stain on her blouse wasn't shame. It was war paint. I spent 5 years in the shadows. Now, I was about to walk into the light and set their world on fire. Section 4, the reveal. I took a breath and walked back into the ballroom. The party was mostly back to normal. Marcus and his crew were by the bar, laughing as they told the story of the party crasher they put in her place. They were the heroes of their own little story. I walked straight toward the stage. People moved out of my way, looking at me with a mix of curiosity and unease. The stained blouse announced my arrival. I stopped at the foot of the stage and just waited. Marcus saw me. His smile vanished, replaced by annoyance. He started walking toward me, probably to have me thrown out. He was about 10 feet away when the music abruptly cut out. The entire ballroom went silent. All heads turned to the stage, where Arthur Covington stood at the podium, his face grim. The party was officially over. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" Arthur's voice boomed. "We are here celebrating the Aerodyne acquisition. But a company is more than its deals. It's its integrity. It's its legacy." He looked across the crowd, his eyes landing on Marcus, who was frozen in place. For 5 years, this company has been led by its executive team. But the ultimate ownership has remained silent. As our founder, Alastair Vance, wished, his heir has been watching. Learning. And waiting. A wave of whispers rippled through the room. An heir. The rumors were that Alastair Vance's daughter was a recluse who wanted nothing to do with the company. Arthur's voice rose. "That time is now. It is my honor to introduce you to the person who holds the controlling interest. The majority owner of Vance Innovations." He extended his hand, not to the front row, but directly to me. "Ms. Ilara Vance." If the room was quiet before, it was a black hole now. Every single person just stared, their brains trying to connect the dots. The girl in the wine-stained blouse. The party crasher. Ilara Vance. The owner. I walked up the steps to the stage, the click of my heels the only sound in the dead silent hall. I stood beside Arthur and looked out at the sea of shocked faces. My eyes found Marcus. His face was a ghastly shade of white, his mouth hanging open in pure, comical horror. Julian and Bryce looked like they'd just seen a ghost. I leaned into the microphone. "Thank you, Arthur," I said, my voice calm, clear, and filling the entire room. "Some of you saw what happened a little while ago. You saw Mr. Sterling, Mr. Thorne, and Mr. Calloway humiliate a guest they thought was beneath them. I let that hang in the air, putting their actions front and center. My father taught me you judge a person not by how they treat their equals, but by how they treat those they think have less power. I came here tonight to see the leaders of this company on the eve of their greatest triumph." I looked right at Marcus. And what I saw was a stunning lack of integrity. A culture of arrogance that starts at the top. A culture that celebrates cruelty. I paused, then delivered the final blow. As the majority owner of this company, my first act is to protect it. Since it's clear you three have no integrity, the Aerodyne deal is cancelled. Effective immediately. Section 5, the fallout and resolution. For a second, nothing. Then, pure chaos. The words, "the deal is cancelled," set off an earthquake. Shouts, gasps, panicked whispers. Investors were scrambling for their phones, their faces turning pale. The party had just become a corporate disaster zone. Marcus finally snapped out of it. "No. You can't," he stammered, stumbling toward the stage. "That deal is ratified. You can't do this." 2 large security guards appeared at his side. "Mr. Sterling, you need to come with us," one said flatly. "Get off me." Marcus shrieked, his voice cracking. "She's lying. This is insane." But it was useless. He, along with a sputtering Julian and Bryce, were dragged out of the ballroom. Their careers ended right there, not with a bang, but with the pathetic whimper of being kicked out of a party. I stood at the podium and watched the beautiful chaos. My phone started buzzing off the hook. News alerts. I could already see the headlines: Vance heiress reveals herself, kills $800 million deal. The company's stock was going to tank. This night was going to cost some very bad people a lot of money. Good. In the days that followed, the collapse was total. The video of "The Poor," filmed by a dozen phones, went viral. It became a global symbol of corporate arrogance. Partners pulled out, the board resigned, and the $800 million deal was officially dead and buried. With the old guard gone, I opened the books. It was even worse than I thought. Marcus and Julian had been cooking them for years, hiding massive debts. The Aerodyne deal was their last-ditch effort to cover their tracks and escape with millions. Canceling the deal didn't just stop their payday, it exposed their crimes. It wasn't long before federal investigators came calling. Rebuilding Vance Innovations took time. I started by promoting the talented people Marcus had pushed aside. I wrote a new corporate charter with integrity and respect at its core. I focused on real, sustainable growth, not flashy headlines. I took my father's brilliant company and gave it a soul. I never saw Marcus Sterling again, except on the news. The story of the gala became a legend, a cautionary tale about underestimating the quiet person in the room. They thought a splash of wine could put me in my place. Instead, it washed away their entire empire and let something better grow in its place. CTA and conclusion: the world is full of people who think their power gives them a right to belittle others. But it's also full of quiet strength, waiting for its moment. Have you ever seen someone get the comeback they truly deserved? Tell us your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.